So I think we all have that, like, what's enough? And am I doing enough? And how that translates to I am enough. And then you add in training and you add in volume and you add in intensity and then you add in comparison and races and what is, Joe B doing on Strava and so doing that they're doing extra rides and extra miles. Like just because people are doing it doesn't mean it's right and doesn't mean it's what's right for you.
Good morning.
Man, you sound like you were in the full throw of packing and throwing away and making trips to the dump and what probably looks like a very barren house at the moment.
Yeah, it's getting there. I try to keep it a little bit homey for my visitors.
Yeah, that's right. I did forget you might be the only person on this planet who's like, hey, I'm actually moving on Monday, but hey, why not come in town for a couple days and spend some time in my very cozy 2-bedroom house that literally only has 2 beds in it right now?
Literally has one bed because we
It's
took
what.
one to the dump. I already warned him that he doesn't have it. He's got an air mattress,
Hey,
but
there's
he's
nothing.
totally fine with it.
Family
Jason's
is
cool.
Family's a pro. This is his what, like his fourth year in a row staying at the Turali crib. So he
Yeah,
is
he's basically a roommate.
he is. He's got like penthouse status. He's a roommate. He's in the platinum club.
I think he said stash penthouses.
He is. But speaking of penthouses, but not really. Welcome, Crushing Iron Podcast, episode 385.
Yeah, it is 385 hours plus
Yeah,
of
more than that. Yeah, it's getting
podcasting.
pretty closer around it. Yeah, well, we've had a few under 60, but it is June 25th, 2020. We appreciate you tuning in. As always, if it's your first time listening, encourage you to go back. We've got obviously 384 episodes on backlog. Mike does a really outstanding job outlining those with topics. You can either, a lot of athletes or a lot of listeners rather like to just kind of go in order, and then a lot of them also like to just kind of pick and choose what's relevant to you. Go back and listen to some of our earlier ones, and then ask yourself, how are these guys still even around? But we're here. We're consistent. We come to you twice a week. We always have, for the most part, Mondays and Thursdays. Occasionally, when life events happen, like who knows when the next one will be with Mike's moving up here to Chattanooga. But we'll be flexible and we'll get it in, as we always have, going on 4 years now. We cover triathlon, we cover life, we cover everything's in between. Every once in a while, we'll have on a race director or a guest. I would, if you haven't yet and you are waiting, don't wait. Go back, listen to Ken Hammond's interview that we did last week. He was exceptional as always. He's been on the podcast a few times. He's intelligent. He's passionate. He knows a lot about all things racing and Ironman and the things they're trying to do now in terms of putting events on. As we have now, Lubbock is still scheduled for this weekend. We'll see how that goes. I'll have an athlete racing in it, and then also one spectating, just kind of there by happenstance. So it'll be interesting to hear the feedback they have on both the experience. It won't be the full on, just because Lubbock's always been a smaller race anyway the last few years. Because I think where it's located in the state of Texas, and it's also brutally hot in a tough time of year. But then Muncie is still scheduled to happen, a race that you and I kind of predicted would happen back in March. So that'll be happening. We'll definitely cover those, but go back and listen to Ken's, educate yourself, and kind of get a better understanding of what it's like to be a race director right now and where you can see the sport going in the next few months. We'll occasionally dive deep into the data, go in more of the technical aspects and specific details of all things swim, bike, run. But then on the other days, we just chat. We have open conversation between two friends, coaches and athletes, and we'll open it up and just see where the podcast takes us.
Yeah, that's what we do, man. And I like that. I think it's good. I think good things come out of it. You had actually mentioned my trips to the dump, right? And
Yes. To the dump.
yesterday, I've been going out. First of all, if I would have known this dump was so close to my house, I would have really used it
You've been
more.
going.
It's
Where
like
is it?
right in the neighborhood, kind of. It's kind of weird. It's like poor people just live right next to this dump, and I had no idea it was there. But so my neighbor was helping me, and that's a whole different story. I think that, I talked to him about it yesterday, and it's like everybody's out there trying to save the world with tweets and everything like that. And I said, what's saving the world is you reaching out to me and telling me I can use your truck. It's like stuff like that, the connection with your neighbors, your neighborhood community, your people. That's why I'm excited to go into camp. But the point I wanted to bring out of the gate was we had a really interesting conversation, and I didn't really know him that great, but he had been in the army, and he was talking about this idea, this concept of over the years they made, you know, like supplies and things, tools that they had to carry and everything. They've made it all lighter
Mm-hmm.
with technology and everything like that. And he said, you know what happened though? They just made us carry more. And I
Mm.
started thinking about that in terms of, you know, carrying weight and training and like, and how to, you know, sort of shedding the fat. The whole dump
Yeah.
thing was just kind of all playing into me, and how we carry extra baggage and burdens along with us through training. And we had a really nice talk about that, because I related it back to when I started doing, or when I was working in the news business and I was building promos with video editing and things like that. And sometimes I would need people to help me do things, but technology made it so that I could do more and more by myself. And I
Mm-hmm.
started doing more and more by myself. And then I never asked for help. And then I got overwhelmed because it was like, I'll just do that. I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. Do it. Next thing you know, I was working 20 hours a day. And what, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so I think that I don't know if that fits in anyway, but I'm sure you
Listen,
get that one.
we can make it fit in. I mean, we can do whatever we want. No, I mean it's a great point. I mean, and I think it translates really well too to how people feel. We use the phrase like a lot that stress is stress, no matter what it is. Like you can go out for a 45-minute run and feel fine. Like I was joking about this, I think on our closed Crushing Our Facebook group because people were commenting and everybody's got their own opinion about like a day off and you got to take a day off and I was like, dude, like I know guys that'll go run for like 30 or 45 minutes and like they'll just sit in their Normatec boots and they'll relax all day and then if I give them a day off, you know what they do? They do like 10 hours of landscaping and go to 17 baseball games for their kids, and they're up all day and they're shelled. Like, to you, which one sounds like a day off? The 45-minute run and the rest of the stuff. Like, but and I'm being serious because people think that, oh, well, just because you're given a day off in training, that's this like magical recovery day where you're going to wake up the next day and feel alive and renewed and blossoming like a flower. But it's all dependent on what happens that day. Like, because to me, like I'd be shelled after landscaping and going to kids' baseball games. Like that's because those are levels of stress. Like you get stress from everywhere. You get it from work, you get it from your personal life, you get it from your professional life, you get it from training, you get it from what's going on in the world, you get it from all kinds of things. And so, like we all carry stress in different ways. And I had this conversation. Well, I have it a lot with our athletes, and that fatigue masks fitness. And one of the more difficult parts of that is unloading fatigue while also managing and being observant of how life stresses are impacting your life. Because you can be as fit as you can possibly be. You can be in a great place physically from the chin down. But in the head, if you're going through like mental and emotional turmoil, then yeah, does fitness matter? Sure, but it's not going to matter as much because you're still going to be under a certain level of stress or load, as you would say. Like you're always carrying more and you're overwhelmed, and there's only so much you can do to barely keep your mouth and your nose above water, just treading, trying to not drown. And there's just so much to take in. I think when athletes look at their global stress, which when I say that I mean like everything in your life and how it contributes. And right now there are significant outside stressors. Like there's always outside life stress. That's just part of it. That's part of being on the planet. But right now it just seems that everywhere you look there is so much additional stress to soak in, and that impacts your training because it weighs on you. Like your mind, it's stressful. You can have a very hard day at work, sitting at your desk, literally not moving, and you get home and you're absolutely exhausted. You're trashed. You could have a super easy day at the office where you got, no meetings, things are going great, their life is perfect, stress is limited, and have a 30-minute run and feel perfect. Like there's so much to take in and understand when I think especially when athletes are creating their own training schedule is that they tend to not take into account life's stressors because it really is it's almost impossible to be fully objective when we look at our training and we look at our lives. Like you actually have to like um you know, you need to feel like someone else is looking out for you. And it's hard to look out for ourselves because I think we all do that. Like we have a tendency to always, like you just said it, like you're, when you were, um, in the news business, like you just take on more and more and more. Like I can do it, and I can do it. And like, of course you can do it, but are you doing it well? And then how are you actually, and are you able to unload it to where the whole point is getting better, or are you just basically, like if you imagine like a truck, you can put center blocks in the back and center blocks in the back, and oh well, the truck can handle it, truck can handle it, and then it pulls it out of the driveway, and like the truck bed is basically like sitting on top of the rear tires going like 6 miles an hour.
Mm.
But oh, it can handle it. It can carry the load. And but you're like, what would you rather do? Maybe take 10 or 15 blocks out of the back and let it cruise at 40 and get to where it needs to go. And so I think it's a great topic in general. I think we've discussed it in at links before, but I think it's always a great reminder, especially with how stressful life is that like you have to monitor, because, and again, when I say to athletes, especially they self-coach, or I'll have this conversation with the ones that I work with, they're like, why can't I have more? Why can't I have more? Because we always think more is better. And you're like, oh, I'm super happy, I'm not injured, like give me more. I'm like, well, the point is to be happy and feel energy and getting fitter. The point isn't to be grumpy and trashed and overtrained and hurt. Like that's not a badge of honor. That's just you showing how stubborn you are and how non-objective you are. And so when you point out athletes' load and you look at their life stressors and going ebbs and flows of busier weeks and of professional life, or they're going on doing travel, and that's one of like athletes' biggest things. It's like, oh, I'm going on vacation, dude. Like it's free time, no work. Load me up. And I'm like, first of all, you've been on vacation before. You say you're going to load up. You take your bike with you. What's it do? It sits in the hallway of the condo. You never get on it because you're on vacation. But vacation also adds additional stress. Like you don't see it as stress. It could be good stress. It could be bad stress. It could be, like travel in general, I think is incredibly hard on people. It's like one of the most underrated aspects of stress I think athletes deal with in terms of what travel does to you. Even if it's like 2 to 3 hours in the car, 6, 7, 8 hours in the car, like you're tired from sitting and just paying attention and driving. Like it's something crazy to think about, but it's just true. And so when you think about like unloading, and I think taper is a good topic and why it's so individual, but you have to look at an athlete's training load and life load when you look at like I've got an athlete right now who's doing Lubbock, and then someone doing Muncie. Obviously, that are bigger races, longer events that they're going to need to be even more fresh. And you take into account what's going on in life and what's going on in training, and you might unload an athlete earlier than you would normally if life was perfect, because life is so stressful, and so many things are going on. And so, no, I think you can always go to the dump and unload some things, but it's about what are you unloading, and it's the things that matter, um, or is it something that's going to actually benefit you, in the future? Because I think oftentimes what we do in life is we unload things and we dump things only to obtain and acquire additional things that are just newer versions of what's going to keep us weighted down and fatigued. They seem more fun. You know what I mean? Like people go to the
Hmm.
dump, like I'm trying to minimize my life, and I don't need so much stuff. And then like the next week, it's like, yeah, I really miss this. I'm gonna go get a new one. But it doesn't seem like you're carrying the same thing just because it's different. And that's what people do with training as well.
Mm. Yeah, it's very difficult for, you said it's hard to be unobjective or hard to be objective when you're
Mhm.
by yourself. And that's so true, man. It's like, and again, back to my thing is like, I think that the technology in this world has created so many opportunities for us to dabble in different things, right? Like, you get people training for Ironman, and then they also decide they want to get into baking bread and having a garden and all. It's just like, because you can just watch a video on how to do it and sort of feel like you know how to do it, or anything is at your fingertips to figure out. So, and the next thing you know, you're down a rabbit hole of trying to do all these new things or what have you. And one thing I realized in this process, a lot of people are looking at the outside. I'm moving and I've just been traveling to Wisconsin. Like you said, I got out of a 9-hour car drive coming back last week and I was absolutely shelled. I
Mhm.
mean, I haven't been really running and my legs are weird anyway, but I was limping around like, boy, that is really taking a lot out of me. And you can kind of see it. But So yeah, I've got a lot going on, and my biggest, I've realized that probably one of my biggest problems is that I don't ask for help. You know, it's one thing to kind of reach out and touch to your neighbor and ask them for help, or to say hey or whatever, but to like actually ask people for help because people want to help, and it's just, I feel like that window is being shut on a lot of things because we think, well, I don't need help. I can just do it. I can just
Right.
do it or whatever. And to me, that translates into, hey, I need help, and I should ask somebody to go run with me.
Mm.
Like do something with someone else
Yeah.
because training by yourself gets so tough, man. And yeah, we can do it, and we can look for David Goggins methods to kind of just keep sucking it up and getting deeper and deeper. But it's so much better to have people along for the ride. And I think that that's one of these things that camp does for us, right? It sort of reminds us that, man, there's really good energy in people, and we should take advantage of it more often in triathlon, right? Because
It's
it's easy to just, it's not going to work out. I can't wait at 30 minutes for them to get off, work and go run with me. I got to go do it now. Do you
hmm
really?
yeah. That's one of my biggest, maybe not one of my biggest fears, but one of the things I recognize a lot with working with athletes, and that, the athletes that I work with, it's obviously up to them if that's their level of comfort. But a lot of athletes will share things with me on a incredibly deep and private level, that's going on in their life. I encourage that because it helps me know what's going on in their life. Like I can't effectively train you if I also don't know how the rest of your life is going. And sometimes athletes will wait and fill me in, and I'm like, first of all, thank you for telling me, but B, now this all makes sense because I can see you've been struggling. You weren't telling me things, and this, like, that level of stress, not being mentally in the game. Like, it's not that you're not mentally in the game, it's that your mental and emotional energy is somewhere else. That's, you know what? That's actually more important. And then you're beating yourself up with training. And when you ask about people not asking for help, that's something I know back from getting in recovery is like, I have so much fear for people right now, because of quarantine, because of this pandemic, and because being alone and isolated, and how we've like veering in that direction is that no one's asking for help. Well, a lot of people aren't asking for help in a lot of ways because we're all committed to suffering alone because we know everyone else is suffering. So we don't want to unload on them and
Right.
communicate with
Yeah.
them that we're suffering because we all know they've already got a lot on their plate, and I just didn't want to bother you with it. It's like, oh, so we're all just going to sit in our own houses suffering in silence because we know everyone else is suffering and we don't want to unload on them, and you've got too much going on right now, and I just didn't want to tell you. I'm like, that's no way for anyone to live. Like, I do believe that generally most people are willing to help, that they would give you the shirt off their back if you needed it. They would go out of their way, but it's up to us to, like, people can't assume that you're hurting or assume that you need something. You have to communicate that. And people are becoming worse and worse at communicating. They aren't, unless it's via text or email or Facebook images or a filter on Instagram, people struggle to communicate. Not just, phrases and quotes and, short videos. It's like things that actually matter, like the words and the feelings and the thoughts that are behind these, sentences or these images that they put out. Like, there's a lot to see and there's a lot to hear. It's just communicating it and letting people know. And I think that, like, I'll have athletes sometimes communicate with me and say, hey, I just needed to do this today because I needed to go be around people. Like, I didn't do the trainer session today. I went to spin class because I just needed to be around people. Good. Perfect. Like, you're never going to hear me complain that, oh, well, you didn't hit the exact intervals today because that was what's going to stimulate the physiological response we are looking for, and that's going to come and bite us on race day. You're going to lose 0.001 miles per hour, and that's just not where you need to be. No, shit like that doesn't matter. What matters is you surrounding yourself with people that are going to give you energy, doing things that are going to support yourself, not starving yourself of energy because you feel like any deviation in that plan is going to be a negative. It's not. You have to do things like that. Go run with your dog. Go run with, have your kid bike next to you and run with them. Like, those are the things that take you out of your own element in terms of how you're maybe suffering or how you're feeling and what you're doing, and like, it can actually propel you into doing things that are better. And I think that that surrounding yourself with great people is one thing, and then just finding like a core group that you can vent with, that you're not going to be judged. Like you're not, oh, you're struggling. Oh, well, that just means you're not motivated. You just don't want it bad enough, man. Like, first of all, people who say that just like they're not living on reality. It has nothing to do with you not wanting it bad enough. It just means that you're human. And that, like I can't
Yeah.
stand people that say like you just don't want it bad enough. You're just not committed. Okay, first of all, we've all got stuff going on, stuff in our lives that's frankly probably way more important than triathlon training, and it should take precedent over what we do. And sometimes those interfere, and sometimes it takes things out of us. And as I was talking on Monday's podcast, that's also applicable with good stress. Like you've got an athlete who's got this really crappy job, and they're struggling to make ends meet, and they're not in a relationship, or they got a bad one, and they're stressed. And then they get like their dream job, they get a twice the salary, and they move to a more beautiful place, and they get in this spectacular relationship, and then like, "Ah, I know, but I don't have much energy." I'm like, I know, because it's still good stress. Like there's just still so much going on. And when athletes continue to beg for more and more and more and more and more, I think what's important for us to always realize, going back to that analogy I gave about the truck and the truck bed with the cinder blocks, is that we all have that limit, that speed limit, that correlates to the amount of load that we can carry in our lives, to where, like I said before, it could be you could full up load the bed of that truck with the maximum cinder blocks that it reads in the instruction, on the pamphlet you get with the car in the glove box, and it's like, oh, the manual says this can hold 2.2 tons, so I'm going to do 2.2 exactly. And then you start the engine, you try to get down the road, and it literally can't go anywhere. Or it's going to take you 5 hours to go 5 miles. Or what you could do is say, oh, this car optimally can carry 1.2 tons and also cruise at 60 miles an hour. So what are you choosing? Forward progress, constant movement, getting to where you need to go while carrying minimal load, like we always refer to minimal effective dose when we talk about training. That is why there are two reasons why I'm such a huge believer in minimal effective dose is that A, you shouldn't have to do more. It's like going to the doctor, like, oh, well, you're sick, so 200 milligrams is probably enough. But you know what? Let's just do 800 just to make sure. No, they don't do that because there are side effects that you don't want to load people up too much. But we do that as triathletes and other endurance sports. Like you're like, oh well, more is better. Like 800, that's fine. And I'm guilty of that too in a lot of ways as a person in recovery who has like an addictive tendency. It's like, if 3 is prescribed, 4 is for sure what I'm
Right.
gonna do. Like I do this all the time, no matter what. Like a little bit of coffee, a little bit more is probably better. Like I'm putting the grounds in the coffee, and you always do that. I think we all do this in life in some way. We do that one little shake at the end. And we're like, one little more is probably fine. Did it make a difference? Zero. Like it made zero difference probably in the taste of the coffee, but it may have made like a smidge stronger. But I wasted coffee for what the point probably is that we always add more thinking it's better instead of looking at what's optimal in our lives. And if you look at prescribing and adding in athletes minimal effective dose, what you're now doing is you're allowing them to perform and gain fitness by lowering the threshold of what's required and still getting the benefit out of it. But the biggest thing you're doing, and not just injury risk prevention, is you're mitigating the effects that the added stress of life will impact. Because if you're training at that level of more is more is more is more is more better, then you have already removed the maximum amount of Jenga blocks in your training cycle. And all it's going to take is one of life's stressors to knock the rest of it over and collapse. Minimal stress, minimal stress. Because you should anticipate, at least I try to, you should anticipate with athletes not the maximum amount of stress, but a good amount of stress. So if you're giving yourself that stress buffer, that includes personal and professional life, and you're doing the physical stressors at its minimum. And I'm not talking under training here. I'm saying you can get the same stimulus by doing this workout versus another workout that you might think is 30 minutes longer and twice as hard. You can still get the same stimulus, but athletes want the bigger, badder, at least optics that come with those sessions. And so I just think it's important to understand as humans that we all have a limit, and we can allow ourselves to get overwhelmed, and we can allow ourselves to take on too much, and we can allow ourselves to commit ourselves to too much. when you don't feel like, you just feel like you're drowning and treading water, you don't feel like you're swimming. And the point is to swim. Like that's the point, is to make forward progress, is to do things like that, not to feel weighted down and just totally, I mean, like, just totally overwhelmed.
When you talk, I always love when you talk about addictive personality, because I think that really ties into triathlon a lot of times. I don't think everybody has addictive personality, but I do think that by nature, it's a lot easier to develop addictive personalities these days, because
Mm-hmm.
everything is at our fingertips. Everything is this and everything. It's like it's so easy to get just a little bit more. And one of the things I always think about is this concept of, like you're saying, just one more cup of coffee or whatever. It's like, why? Right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
feel fine. You feel fine. You feel really good, actually, but there's this natural desire to kind of be juiced, or you know what I mean? Like, and I think that plays into training too. It's like, why can't we just be fine with feeling fine and walking away from a workout feeling good? And it's like we get a lot of us, and I'm just saying this firsthand because a lot of times I'll be in a workout and be like, man, it's over, but I feel good. I got to go hammer
Mm-hmm.
out a couple more. I got to take advantage of this. But instead of taking advantage of it in a way of reserving energies for tomorrow, we will always want to be flying high as much as we can. And that's like, living in a race instead of training for a race. It's like I don't know how, it's like, and the same goes for if we have a bad workout one day and it's like, tomorrow I need to go redeem that,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just listening to it and paying attention to it and maybe holding back on some of the spice for a while,
It's
adjusting.
yeah, I love what you said about feeling like it's enough. Like there's, and again, it's what you see in social media all the time. It's like, people bent over and, with their head laying on their forearm, and they're just bent over in exhaustion. And, people are like, oh, that's tough. That's how you should do it. And my first thought was, well, someone obviously programmed your workout wrong. Like that was too hard. Because that's not supposed to be like that. Like occasionally at a race, you should be like barely, like, in my opinion, you should be barely functioning. You've seen me at races before, like, most notably probably Texas 70.3 2 years ago. Like when I finished, I was done. I was actually probably done a mile before it, but I found a way to just like somehow keep moving. But I was toast. Like I was totally done. But that was the most done I had been in like a year. Like you don't do that in training. It's nice to we talk about this, and going way back to probably one of our first 20 podcasts, and like something that I know that I worked with you in talking through with, and when we first started working together 8 7 8 years ago, was like, you've only got a few matches to burn, and you should use them on race day. And what I mean by that is, like, there's only so many times a year where you can really really dig deep, where you can not just light the match, but you can let it burn all the way down to your fingertips. But what happens is, let's say you got 3 or 4 of those a year, maybe, and that's really, honestly, that's like max for most people. Some people it's just one. Some people, they can only just dig deep one time, because not only is it a physical burn, but it's a mentally and emotionally just like, overwhelmingly exhausting to make yourself dig that deep, because what happens is your body recognizes what you're doing and becomes more resistant to it. And so when you think about athletes and people, and their professional lives too, like, I just gotta go 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 go, like, I only sleep 4 hours a night, man, I'm up all day grinding, baby, I'm working. I'm like, well, you know what, then most of your work's probably fairly unproductive, because you're really not probably accomplishing near as much as you could if you actually slept more and were able to do more things, get more energy, you felt better, and you're healthier and you're more focused. So what a lot of athletes do is they'll take their 3 or 4 matches, and they'll light them, or they'll strike them like once a week or a couple times a month. They won't let them burn all the way, but they'll strike them, and they'll, or maybe they'll even let them burn a little bit. They'll dig way too deep into a workout. They'll do something they shouldn't have done, and they'll dig way too deep. Well, guess what happens? You don't get a new match on race day. You're going to have to go back and strike that. Like, have you ever tried to strike the same match twice? Ain't gonna happen. Or even if you strike it one time and it doesn't fully light, and you go back to strike it again, it's significantly harder to actually get it to light. unless you get it right the first time. So you don't get a new match. Your body doesn't just automatically, recover and heal itself so much that, it's going to create a brand new one. You get 3 or 4 max for the year. But so many athletes continue to strike it and burn it and strike it and burn it. And then race day, they go to strike it and they wonder why it won't light. Or they wonder why they've already whittled down, the first half of the match where it's like, it's black and brittle and it's like going to fall off the first part of the match. And they're wondering why they don't have that much left. Look back at your training and answer those questions, because so many athletes do that. They get a match, and what they actually don't do is don't even create a bigger match, because that's the point of training, right? It's to build a bigger, better, more flammable, longer lasting, burning match. It's not to keep reusing the one you've had. And that's what athletes do, is they just burn them and burn them and burn them and burn them. And yes, like I said before, you can do that physically, but you also do it like mentally and emotionally. Like I was telling an athlete this yesterday that is trying to do, like, a lot of athletes have obviously had races canceled basically for the whole year. They're trying to be really careful about, not going to races, not traveling or doing things. And so they're trying to look at alternative challenges. And this athlete was looking at doing like an Eberstein attempt on Zwift, and like the training it's going to take to do that. And this athlete was like, well, I know I'm going to do like some really, really long days on trainer just to get, used to that. I was like, yeah, you're going to need to do some of those. But going back to like addictive personalities, like most athletes think, I need to be on the trainer 24/7 all the time to like callous my mind. And while you do need to be mentally tough and aware of the objective, if you do that too long leading up to it, guess what? Your mind is going to blow before you even get there. It's going to say, you know what? I've had enough. This isn't for me. And so when you get to the big day or the big event, it's going to be like, let's see, I've already like overdone it. I'm talking about mentally. Like you've already asked me to focus for 500 hours on doing this one thing that I don't like, but you're making me do it. At some point, when you ask it to do it, it's going to be like, no, I'm good. And you're just not going to have it. And for a lot of people, that is race day. Unfortunately, they get to the big day and they've tried to do, these absolutely idiotic like Ironman brick workouts. They do like 100-mile bike ride and like 15, 20-mile runs. And they get to race and like, I don't know, man. I just didn't have it. Just couldn't push through. Just didn't have it. My legs were there. I'm like, first of all, you shouldn't have done that. B, your mind was like, hello, I already did this again. Now you want me to do it over again and do it harder? No thanks. I'm out. I'm walking away. And so, like, I think yes, is the human body an incredible thing? It is. It is the smartest, most impressive thing on this planet, is your own body and your brain and what it can do and what it can achieve. But don't take it for granted, and don't always assume that doing things repetitively like that is like, coming from the guy who says, varieties for the week, but going through things like, you just can't ask of yourself mentally, emotionally, physically to do these strenuous and these stressful things so many times before one of those three, because all it takes is one. And I think that's something that we forget. I mean, I can give you a specific example. Like before I got sober, like my physical body never gave up in races. But mentally and emotionally, I was in such a terrible place. I was so depressed. I was battling so many demons that in order for me to keep telling my body to keep going, I just couldn't do it. Like a month, just over a month before I went into treatment and got sober, I was winning a race and I just stopped and pulled over, and I was like, I can't do it anymore. Physically, I felt wonderful, but mentally and emotionally, which it takes all three of those to make it for a great race. Mentally and emotionally, I mean, you know where I was at that point in my life. I was
Oh
done.
yeah.
I had nothing left to give. And so you can't just look at racing and training and life as like, oh, well, physically I'm super fit. But if mentally and emotionally you are exhausted and you are stressed and your mind is elsewhere and you're carrying demons and you're carrying baggage, like you can't expect, going back to like, the when I talk about unloading, loading up the back of the truck, I use that example with athletes and talking about shedding fatigue to show your fitness. Well, you make that truck bigger, faster, stronger, carrying that big load. Well, now you unload the physical stress. If you're still carrying a tremendous amount of mental and emotional stress in the back, then no amount of taper, no amount of fitness, no amount of being stressed is going to be able to overcome that. And I just think it's one thing that athletes tend to ignore because we always want to be tough, and we're supposed to be the tough athletes that can keep going and we can press on. And if I'm not doing it, I'm just showing weakness. And that's just not the case. Like, you have to address all three. Like, they're connected. You know why? Because they're inside of you. Like, your mind, your heart, your body, like, those things are connected. They are all connected. If you don't nurture them, you don't pay attention to them, you don't manage the stress that goes between all three of them, then you're never going to fully achieve what you really want to in performance or in life.
What you were just talking about, it really, I think, explains well that concept that you've brought up before of it's better to go into a race undertrained than 1% overtrained,
Mm-hmm.
because that mentality is where it comes from. I mean, I've had athletes say, I didn't have it today, I just had to quit on 1 hour runs,
Mm-hmm.
so that stuff happens all the time. So I know when you were explaining how you felt in that race, I know that feeling, man. I've had it many, many times, and I know everybody probably has. It's just that it's not physical. It's like you're going out there and there's just so much of a mental burden going on in your head, whether it's thinking about the race or thinking about work or, like, whatever it may be. And I think it honestly is most of the time is sort of this mental fatigue that you just can't get over and trick your body into rolling, and so you just kind of stop. So, I mean, going into a race, that's why when I know we talk about taper, and sometimes, I've done short tapers, sometimes I've done longer tapers, because I know that, like, during Ironman training season, it can get, if you go too long and, you have that 6 hour ride, three weeks out or whatever like that. Sometimes I get done with that and I'm like, okay, that was close enough to the edge. And
Mm-hmm.
I just need to spend the next 3 weeks getting my mind right,
Right.
because if I can, then, and so you got your taper, and, uh, a lot of people want to pay, and I've tried this, and I've done this too, where you pay, strict attention to the taper and just do it exactly right. And then for a lot of times, though, that can add even more stress to me, because I'm like, okay, man, I've got just, like, I feel burned out. I can't
Yes.
just stick with the verbatimness of this
Yep.
whole taper. Sometimes that just might mean nothing, and I can't let that mentally drag me down. Like, oh my God, I just missed a 20-minute easy run, and that's going to screw up my whole race, or
Yes,
whatever
sir.
the case.
I'm losing fitness. I'm no longer gonna have it
You know
then.
what I mean? So it's like, man, you have to really. That's why I say it's like, once that, your main, once you hit taper, I think taper is really about getting the mind right and getting that confidence back, and sort of not remembering the bad stuff, but like being like, okay, I had some really good rides. I am ready. Even though my last ride might have sucked, it's like, that's your goal, is to get that out of your head and get mentally prepared for that race, and that's rested, mentally rested, and that's why over the years I've really been good at, pretty much stacking my bags weeks in advance, because when I get to an Ironman site or any kind of race site, I just want to meet people and hang out, and not worry about, did I put my goggles in here, or, you know what I mean? Like, the things that, or worry about, like, what can go wrong and things like that. I just want to be able to let go and be free out there, because I've had that, when you go in, when you go into these races stressed out, you can tell, man. It's like, you either A, you have to be relaxed when you get in that water, or B, you have to find a way to relax when you get in that water, and let that kind of help you get into the flow of the day. And don't throw away the day if you're not feeling it, because it can come. That's the thing, is you're in really good shape by that point. So you can't panic early on in the race. You have to sort of, like, recalibrate while you're there or something like that. So,
I I love what you said about mental fatigue. And how so many athletes just, like, they think that's a sign of weakness, or that, like, usually when I would say not usually, maybe half the time I tell an athlete to take a day off, it's because they need a mental break, not a physical break. And athletes do that in terms of, like, adhering to their training plan, and especially the taper. Like, if an athlete's going through, like, a taper for, like, a big event, I'm, like, all up in their business, like, every day. I'm like, hey, how you feeling? How you feeling? How you feeling? Like, I can see in training, but, like, I need to know where you are mentally. Do you need a day off? Like, I gave Nicole a day off on Monday that wasn't scheduled, because it was, like, a harder mental day on her. Sunday, I was like, let's just take a day off tomorrow. Like, we're as fit as we're going to be. We're not going to get any fitter. But what we need is that, like, to reduce your mental and emotional fatigue. and we need to rest that. Like, picture a pilot or a conductor or someone who drives like a piece of heavy machinery. The machinery can work great, but if the person driving it or flying it or operating it is tired mentally, they went up too long, they haven't slept enough, then there could be a very, or they could be, like I'm saying, like they're not going to use this piece of equipment to its fullest extent, or it's the safest, or do the best they can. So what's better? Oh, I know you've worked, like 5 16-hour days in a row, but we got to go. We got this great piece of equipment. You need to work it. You're not going to work it well. And in fact, you might crash it. You might injure yourself or others. Versus, you know what? Let's take a day off and let you come back mentally and emotionally sharp, so you can make good decisions. You can do things the way they need to be. And athletes just, they, it's, and I think I say athletes, I mean athletes as we are as humans. Like we struggle with accepting and not accepting, maybe recognizing that that is in fact what is actually weighing us down, is the mental and emotional aspect of it. And that we have to, again, like I was saying, like treat those as all three, like how they complement each other or take away. I say at the beginning of like every podcast, we talk about training in life, and sometimes how they can complement each other, and sometimes how they can take away. And it's balancing those out to where you're never fully kidding. Like one thing is taking like away fully from the other. It's riding that line where it's positive. You're happy. You're healthy. It's not total, like neither is totally draining. You're not draining yourself in life and overwhelming yourself and taking on too much. It's being objective and having a good perspective on life and what's important. Same thing goes for training. It's not I'm doing too much, but I have to do more, and I got to get faster and doing this. I'm like, dude, you just got to do enough, and enough for most of us. And a lot of this goes back with people's how they were raised, how they were brought up, things are going through. Like your feeling of enough is so relative based on your experiences in life. Are you like that was one of my harder things growing up, is for some reason I just had this innate feeling inside of me that I never felt like I was enough. I never felt like anything I did was enough. Like I remember the first time I felt it was in like third grade. Like I just felt like, because I went home, I got a B, which first of all, like why do they even give grades in third grade? They probably don't do that anymore. But I got a B on something, and I went home and my mom was like, "Hey, how'd you do this test or this whatever it was, spelling whatever?" And I said, "Oh, I got an A," because that one level up made me feel better, because to me that B plus just wasn't enough. And then I had other things in my life happen that to me just kind of reiterated and kind of threw gasoline on already like an internal fire that was, you're not good enough in life. And it permeated for years and years and years and years. So I think we all have that, like, what's enough, and am I doing enough, and how that translates to I am enough. And then you add in training, and you add in volume, and you add in intensity, and then you add in comparison and races, and what is Joe B doing on Strava and so doing that, they're doing extra rides and extra miles. Like just because people are doing it doesn't mean it's right, and doesn't mean it's what's right for you, because everyone's battling it. I think we oftentimes use this as kind of endurance sports as our expression of how we feel, or our voids, or our fulfillment is what we're doing, and or to what extent we're able and willing to go, and what we're committing to. Because usually when people overcommit or sign up for like races they shouldn't have, is because they're trying to fill the same level of void that's missing in their life. Like the bigger void you have, the bigger ask you have to make of things outside of your body, with work, with relationships, with, training. My life is going crappy. You know what sounds good? 3 Ironmen. Let's do it. That's going to resurrect me from the ashes. It's like you laugh because it's true. Like people do it all the time. I'm sure there are plenty of people who listen to this podcast like, oh yeah, hell, raise his hand in the car. Like that's me. Or you don't want to raise it because it's you. Like that's just true. Like, and we've all been there. It's like we just feel like the more is the better, and eventually, they say about, when you're lighting fires or doing things, like you can put too much on it and it'll suffocate and burn itself out. If you put too much wood on it, then it's going to collapse, and it's going to burn itself out, and it's going to take away all the air it needs, and you're not going to be able to have it, burning the way you want to. More isn't always better. And like carrying too many things at once and doing like you're not going to be able to do it. It's not sustainable. And mentally, even like there are specific workouts to do, like these sustained power sessions that I'll give athletes on the bike. They're incredibly helpful physically, but they are brutal mentally, because you're asking an athlete, like example, like you might do 4 8-minute intervals with only 2-minute rest, in between each 8-minute interval. So like barely enough rest. But the 8 minutes are like your best effort. So you're doing 32 minutes of your best effort in like 40 minutes. And it takes a session or two to kind of get the pacing down, and then after that, really, they can only do it like maybe 2 or 3 more times. Physically, they get huge gains from it, but mentally, they're like, you can see in their comments, they're like, mentally, like it was just exhausting to tell your body to keep holding it because it's just enough that you can keep going. But usually when I back off of it and take it away, it's not because physically they're not responding anymore. It's because mentally you just can't keep asking them to do it over and over and over and over and over again, because they're eventually going to be like, yeah, this we're not having this conversation again. My body, my mind are like, you know what, we've had this the last couple of weeks. We're not having it again. We're done. And so it's just monitoring that whole, mental and emotional energy levels and the fatigue you have with, like, like minimizing things when life is crazy. It's like, oh, I'm moving, I'm doing this, like, what sounds good, let's just, I'm going to heap on some events to add some more things. Like, no, you need to strip things down to the bare minimum. Like, it's just, but that's not what athletes do. They say they're, most athletes or a lot of triathletes would consider themselves overachievers. But most of them are not. Most of them are just overdoers, because they're not achieving, like they're achieving very few or very little of what they actually want to accomplish because they're stretched so thin.
I had to laugh there, man. Because I have to ask my questions. Just like have to ask myself, what am I chasing all the time? And as you're talking about that, I was thinking about how we can. Sometimes it's a weird dynamic, right? Our mind is fatigued. We're tired. We're burned out. There's a lot of stress going on, and we often, when I say we, I mean me, try to use my body to get my mind back going, get going, and it's like, so that's why we think about things like that. The 3 Ironmans, like, man, I got to get my ass in gear. I got to get going. Yep. So I'm going to sign up for 3. And it's funny because I was just thinking about that again this week, of course. I keep, I haven't been training a whole lot this year. It's been kind of a weird thing. So I put in Ironman Wisconsin training plan, and that kind of fell apart. And then I was like, maybe I'll just do chat. And now I'm on the Louisville thing because it's a little bit later. I'm like, hey, I can turn that around. I just need to prove.
2 whole weeks, right? It's 2 whole weeks. Like, I got this. Man, those 2 weeks are money.
Well, that's how you calculate it. Sometimes it's like, well, 2 weeks is a long time. That's a taper, 2-week tape. Blah, blah, blah. And so I've been kind of thinking, I'm like, all right, camps this weekend. I'm not going to do a lot. I'm going to kind of dabble. I'm going to see how I feel and get out there. And if I feel good, I'm going to start putting my mind towards Louisville. And it's just premature. I don't know what I'm thinking. But again, you're right, because there's a lot going on. I've been moving, I've been unloading U-Hauls and loading them and blah, 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 and driving back and forth. I am definitely fatigued. And it just kind of bums me out, I think that's the thing is like, man, because you have this image or illusion in your mind of like days when you felt better, and you're like, man, that's because I got to get into training. I got to start crushing it more often, and then these pains won't feel as harsh because I'll be used to them and all this stuff. It's kind of like sometimes you got to force yourself in there too. So there is that fine line a little bit, I think, that we need to be aware of. And I do think sometimes it can work. If you're just being lazy and your mind is tired, that's one of those situations when your body can kind of get the juices flowing. You know what I mean? And that definitely happens when you're not working.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that, like, how we use the phrase, like, I've always got the phrase, like, I've always got to be chasing something. And if you think of, like, the word, like, chasing, is like, is that even, like, a positive thing? Like, to be chasing something instead of being, like, committing to a process that will eventually get you to a goal? Because chasing, to me, always feels like you're behind. And you're trying to get something that's way out of reach, or you're trying to get closer to it, instead of, and if if you don't catch it, or you don't get to it, then it's a loss. Like, I'm chasing this, I'm chasing that, I'm trying to get, then you have this like expectation result, or something in the distance like a race. But if it doesn't happen, it's to get there. And I can imagine it's probably true for athletes right now who have these like races that they're like, the only reason they're getting up and doing workouts because they have this race on their calendar, and then it's removed and they're like, okay, I'm done. Like I get nothing. Like, it's gone. And so I think when athletes try to rephrase, like, what am I trying, how am I trying to live? And what am I trying to integrate into my life to get the best out of me physically or emotionally or mentally? And what is adding to my life, and figuring out what do I need to remove? What do I need to add? And then what is this going to equal in 6, 8, 12, 16 months, whatever it is? And if we think we look at it that way, because I do think it's an interesting topic in the, does mood follow action, or does action follow mood? I think it's different. I think it's different for everyone. I think it differs on days. 'Cause some people could be in a great mood and be like, I'm in such a great mood, I don't want to go work out. I'm having a great day, why do I go work out? Some people are in a terrible mood, like, I have to work out, or they're in a bad mood and they go work out. They're in a great mood. It does different things for us, I think, on different days and in different circumstances. But when you think about like adding additional things to your plate, for usually for most people, and this is why people don't do it, is the simplest answer is oftentimes always the best, which for most people, it's create a habit that's sustainable that you can then build off of. Get consistent with your training, and then see what is available. And then you'll start to define what is possible. And then once you define what's possible, then you can start to look at how this process might end in a specific race or a specific goal. Most people like to work backwards. Oh, well, I'm not working out. I really need something to jumpstart me. Let's sign up for, Ironman Florida, even though I haven't ran or biked or swam in like 8 or 9 months. That seems like a good idea. That's going to get me out of bed tomorrow morning. It might for a day, until the you know the infatuation phase wears off. Like, everyone's been in that with the relationship. It's like, you're dating, you're like, oh, I don't know, guys. Like, second date, you're like, I think she's the one. I'm just in
the
love,
one.
man. Like, I don't got time for you guys. Like, and then like 2 more dates happen. You start to figure out more things, and you're like, I don't really want to see her today. I got other things to do, like, brush my teeth and floss. And then you meet the parents. You're like, I cannot see myself doing this. Like, I don't want to work for it, and it's gone. And then you like meet the person you're gonna marry, and you're like, this isn't perfect, but it's definitely worth working for. That I can see myself working for this for a long time. And that's how training is too. Like, people jump into these and commit to these big feats or these big challenges and events like that. And I can always sense it, because it's like, okay, something's wavering, or going lower in terms of your motivation or energy or commitment, or things are being shifted elsewhere. And what you're doing is you're trying to forcefully rip that energy and motivation commitment back or away from a different part of your life that's now trying to take that and allocate it to itself so it can do better. So your response is, well, no. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create this other huge event on this other end of the spectrum that physically is going to demand much more from me than I can logistically and realistically do. But that's just kind of where I want to be right now. And athletes do that every day, all the time. They try to equal out the allocation of energy, mental and emotional energy, to another area of their life with overcompensating with a race registration. I just don't want to go this way. You know what? I think I'm going to force my. And then what happens is they're miserable in all three, because now they've stretched themselves so thin, they've overextended themselves to the widest margin that nothing is going to get accomplished. And if they even get to that point to where they aren't going to accomplish what they wanted to do to their fullest extent, between point A and point Z, they're going to be stretched so thin. At some point, it's going to break, and then it's all going to come crumbling down, and nothing is going to be working the way they want it to. And so when it comes like overextending ourselves, like we always have to, I think, be working and recognizing on what is enough and what is too much and what is perfect. Because like I have this conversation with every athlete when they start. When you look at your first week, you should be able to say, I can do all of this 100%. If not, like, I can give me more, because then I know it's perfect. Because what you don't want is to get a week and be like, I can probably get that in. If I rearrange things and I redo things, like, no, That's not how it's supposed to be. Like if you're not trying to fit puzzle pieces into spaces they don't belong. And that's what athletes do day in and day out every single week of the year is they try to fit training puzzle pieces into life's puzzle pieces that don't fit, or vice versa. And they end up coming up with nothing. No finished puzzle, no complete picture, nothing is done. The goal is not finished. They just have a whole bunch of puzzle pieces in a pile and think, you know what? I wasn't able to finish this 300 piece one. You know what's going to get me going and focused? The 2,000 piece puzzle, baby. Let me go and get the 2,000 puzzle piece of like, some crazy, Picasso painting. You're like, that's not going to work either, man.
Yeah. Yeah, that what you're just saying there about that first week of training really, we always do analogies, and it just made me think of something. It's sort of like if you know for sure you can do it, that's great, right? And you might want more or whatever. And that translates to me always in racing, right? It's like on mile 25 of the Ironman bike. If you're like, man, I feel great today, and that's always an indicator to me. Is like, all right, pull it back a little bit because you want to keep that feeling like to the point of in a race where you can do it, right? You want to whatever that feels like, and if you've got something at the end, then you can turn it on. I had a thought too about when we were talking about chasing,
Mm-hmm.
what that is and what are we chasing, and how that could actually be a good thing. A lot of people probably don't know, but I tried to start this podcast or the blog that we started 7 years ago or 8 years ago, whatever. And the first thing I was going to call it was Chasing Iron, which is kind of weird. And I thought somebody already had that name, thankfully. But chasing, I think, is good if you're under control, right? It's
Mm.
not like I think we look at chasing a lot of times as we think about, it's like chasing down the burglar who stole our bird feeder through the neighborhood or something like that. Like that's the mentality we get is sort of this racing after something. But if we're chasing under control, it's sort of like a good position to be in a lot of times in stock car, in racing or in Ironman or something like that. If you're feeling good and you're just a little bit behind, you're chasing them, but you're going at your pace. You're going at
Mm-hmm.
your abilities, and you're just moving toward it, right? That's the way I think about it, or was just thinking about it anyway. Is like, if you're going to chase something, just chase it, under control, and go after it at a pace and a speed and in a way that you can handle, and then just keep kind of turning it up just a little bit, as you go. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's obviously the secret really to training most of the time is to just keep it within your grip and not like chase flailing around, but just be kind of trailing. Maybe that's more of an accurate way. I'm
Yeah,
trailing.
no, I like that. Yeah, about the being steady with it. You don't want to
Mhm.
same on the brakes. You don't want to throw down the pedal on the gas. You got to be steady and smart with it, or you're gonna burn up and crash, or you're gonna be like, yeah, I'm never gonna get there. I'm giving everything that I have. I might as well stop and turn around. Because ultimately, if you're doing it consistently and you're being steady and you keep after it day in and day out, then even if you don't catch it, whatever original goal it was, you're going to surpass other goals that you would have stopped short of had you not continued to go.
Yep.
Yep. You could
All
have,
right. Well,
you
it's
could have,
time to
you
chase
could have
camp.
snuck in a yeah, man. It is time to
Yeah,
it's
man.
time to
Yeah.
chase camp. We're recording this a day early, but at this point, when you're listening to it, more than likely we'll be at the lab or doing open water swim. But yes, that's tonight. Super pumped to see everyone coming into town and getting some hard work and hard training in while keeping our distance. But yeah, it's gonna be fun. I'm looking forward to it. And we'll be back. Well, probably on Monday. I know you got busy Monday. I might have to get creative with our podcast schedule next week. It's gonna be. We'll figure it out. Maybe a little 5-minute dogcast number 2. Maddie can do
Oh
some things
man,
while you're
dude,
loading up the
she
truck.
knows something's up. That's
Of
kind of making me
course she
sad.
does, man. She's like, you're throwing away. Wow, don't be
I
sad.
just threw away her bed. That's
Oh,
not cool,
okay.
man.
Never mind. Never mind. I retract my previous statement.
Oh
She
God.
has the right to be sad. She
I'm
needs a
getting
new
her a
one.
new bed though.
Yeah.
A little smaller one than the queen size that she
Yeah.
owned for many years.
That's right.
I went in there, the bed was gone, and there's a carpet in there, and she's just laying in there going,
Oh,
oh
dude,
man,
she
what's
knows.
up, dude? What's going on? There's nothing here.
No, it's coming. It's good. She'll appreciate the move. She'll
Yeah,
make a
she
good
needs it.
spot.
We all need a restart. So let's do it.
As always, we appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you giving us your time. You have a lot of options. If you like and you enjoyed what you heard today, please give us a review on iTunes. It helps other athletes and listeners find us and be part of our awesome growing community. If you want to be part of the conversation, you can go to Facebook, search Crushing Iron Group, answer a simple question, we'll let you in. If you want more info on all the things we do, camps, community, and coaching, including our online hub, you can visit our website, c26triathlon.com. And if you want to reach out to us individually, you can get a hold of Mike, crushingiron@gmail.com, or you can always reach out to me directly, c26coach@gmail.com.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it, man.
See you, Brooks.